again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright.
Welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Delighted to welcome Craig Cahoon. How are you, Craig?
I'm well, Steve.
We were talking before we came on about the pronunciation of the name, weren't we? Because I was going, is it Colquhoun? What is it? And you told us a great story. So will you share that with the public, where the name comes from?
Cahoon. Cahoon's a Scottish name. Goes back to the 7th century. And they were slaughtered by the MacGregors and the MacDonalds. And some of the family fled down into Ireland, into Northern England, and some fled over into Americas. And that's when the Americans, they couldn't pronounce Cahoon, couldn't even say the word Cahoon. So they called them the Kahuna, the big Kahuna, hence the saying the big Kahuna, and the cowboy Calhoons.
Fantastic. Great story. Something I didn't know about you. So that's not why we got you on either, to go back in ancient history. Well, we got you on really to talk about your wonderful work and obviously just to introduce you to Newcastle fans, I guess, because people will have read about you in the newspapers. People will know your work very well if they go to St James's Park or if they've seen photographs of St James's Park over the last 20 odd years. But not many people will have heard from you and had a chance to hear your story. So tell us how you got into this.
Glassblowing. That's artistic glassblowing, Steve. When you see a glassblowing, people think you're blown from the furnace, working from a furnace. What I do is I work over a flame, a naked flame. I don't work naked over a flame. I work over a naked flame. And of course, because I've been a football player all my life and always been involved in football, when I got into football in glassblowing at 16, it was called artistic glassblowing. And I got introduced to it as a young trainee at 16. And I developed my own technique and style immediately from day one. And now here we are 43 years later, you know, still with me endeavour, still doing all kinds of sculptures for all kinds of celebrities over the years. 43 years, a long time, Steve.
It is. Is it a difficult craft to learn?
Well, it's simple. I think when people have asked me over the years, I've trained trainees and young people all around the world loads of times, and some people can pick it up naturally like I did. If you've got an infinity to draw or paint, then obviously to pick up the glassblowing skill, you're going to use your glassblowing. You're going to use your artistic ability to come out in the glassblowing. So if you can't draw a horse, you're never going to be able to make one in glass.
Yeah.
Unless you train, of course. So it's kind of a sticky wicket, that one. Is it hard? I found it quite straightforward and easy. I found it just mesmerizing. I found it.
I can, yeah. I mean, and obviously with the work you've gone on to do, I'm not surprised. I mean, is it something that you have to go and study? I mean, like pottery making. I mean, we've all seen the film Ghost and Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze. Yeah. Is it as complicated as that? I think we've probably all had a go at that kind of thing at museums where we've tried to make our own pottery and it comes out a mess. Is it something that you either got a talent for or you just you pick it up? You have to go away to learn it.
Good question. Well, Sunderland is with the glass centre. Yeah. And I worked over in Sunderland for many years, training people to make the glass ship and bottle trade when they had a big boom in the early 80s of making ships and bottles.
Yeah.
And I used to train loads of people how to actually make a little glass ship with the sails and then put them in a bottle. And lots of people were trained to do that, and they had different ways of doing the rigging and doing the actual bottle, sealing the article in the bottle. And that's predominantly how I spent a lot of my time over in Sunderland doing that. But I've always been based back here in Newcastle, always been Newcastle based. So it's kind of, some people find it easy to learn the trade, Stephen, some people don't. There isn't such an NVQ. There's not an NVQ where you can pick it up and read and learn about how to do it. But it's a dying art. Artistic glassblowing's a dying art. I think I'm kind of now approaching 60 and there's nobody where you can go and watch the skill or the art like I do. But now we've got the wonderful digital world. I can do my videos and people can watch me work and approach me on whatever their inquiry is. That's the way that I'm working.
Okay, so you talked football. You know, you said you did football. Who was the first footballer that you did a sculpture for?
The first football player, I'm going back to the late 80s, early 90s, Steve. And I had my little glassblown enterprise little shop in the little village up the road there in Burden near Killingworth. And I was well known in the area for being a non-league football player, played non-league standard and, you know, played some great players. And people would come and commission us to do a black and white magpie or a black and white flower or a black and white trophy for their football club. And the first a guy called Ray Mulroy was Walker Central. He was the manager of Walker Central.
Yeah.
And they were having that annual function at the assembly rooms. And it was at the time when Alan had just signed for the club, Alan Shearer. And Raymer, who's no Ray Mulroy, he's called Raymer. Ray got the permission off Alan, who granted permission for me to sculpt them in glass. And then it was auctioned on the evening at the assembly rooms. And that was I can't remember what year did Alan sign for the club.
Well, he signed in 95. He was, because he wasn't the first year of the entertainers, you know, 92, 93, 94.
Yeah.
So it was 95, yeah.
So I think Alan was one of the first, but I mean, previously I'd done Peter Beardsley, done Stevie Bruce, done Jack Charlton, done all kinds of sculptures for all different football clubs and all different approaches, similar to when you've had your event, Steve. I've done one or two different, whoever the prominent speaker is would always be the person that would recreate, and then they would sign it and it would be auctioned. So depending on the audience, some of the auction items would go for a good fee and the football team would benefact, and it would be a good promotion for me and good advertisement for the business, you know.
You mentioned Big Jack. I mean, he was a character, wasn't he? What was he like? What was he like to meet and do a sculpture for?
Oh, Jack was just, I got to know him quite personally. It was quite hard when he died. I felt it a little bit, you know. I was based out in America, but before I went to America, I met Jack a few times and done sculptures that he signed. One was for the Duke of Northumberland. I think there was an event at St James's Park where Stevie Dale at Walls End Boys Club approached us and said, Craig, we've got the Duke of Northumberland coming down to an event in Newcastle. It was all youth initiative backed, and the guest speaker was Jack. And that's where it began with Jack. And I made a sculpture of him heading the ball, and it was auctioned. And I think it's too long ago to remember how much it went for, but it was a good fee. It was good. And obviously the benefactor was, at the time, I'm trying to remember who was the benefactor. Dear me, Steve. There's been that many over the years, you know.
Yeah.
That many events. Yeah. But my friendship continued with Jack. And of course, if you jump forward to 2001, just after 9/11, actually on the morning of 9/11, I was based in America doing the Kentucky Derby. And I seen in the English newspaper that the World Cup squad of 66 were visiting Florida. So I straight away jumped on the phone and organised a meeting with the event organiser to try and get them to come to the Southwest Florida, where I was based in Naples. And lo and behold, Jack Charlton, Alan Ball, Roger Hunt, and George Cohen, the wonderful George, came for the weekend. And we I kind of arranged and hosted a game of golf for all the lads to play with the lads. And then we had a big event in the English pub in Naples. And Jack was the guest speaker, Halloween night. And Alan Ball, the incredible Alan Ball, was fantastic. And I made sculptures. I made a sculpture of because I knew Jack quite well. I made Jack a sculpture of a fish hanging off a Christmas bauble. And he absolutely loved it. I've got a photograph of it somewhere. And that's just continued my friendship. Jack walked in the room and he went, there was about 50 to 100 people in the room. And Jack walked in, he went, there's more Geordies in here than the big market, Craig. Happy memories.
Happy memories, and a great guy. So Jack, he is sadly missed. You mentioned the Kentucky Derby, so it's probably the right time to mention that a few years later, you almost had an encounter with Her Majesty the Queen.
Well, I made always, because I was brought up in Killingworth, which is obviously a mile from the racetrack. I used to go to the racetrack, and I used to run down the bottom of the track and put my head to the ground. You can hear the hooves running from the other side of the racetrack. I was only 6 or 7, playing football and going to the racetrack with my dad and my brother. And I used to draw the racetrack, Gossie Park. I used to sit back and draw the entire racetrack by a sketch pad and a pen. And of course, when I found glassblowing, on the first day of glassblowing, I said to the guy that trained me, Ray Story, I says, Ray, do you make horses? And Ray, funnily enough, to answer your question of is it difficult to learn, Ray says, Craig, I can't make horses. He was trained as a scientific glassblower thermal syndicate. So he wasn't as artistic as what I became. And Raymond says, I says, Ray, I'm going to make horses. And I'm going to make the famous horse race, the Kentucky Derby. That was the first week in May 1980. And yeah, 1999, I give up everything in the UK to go over to follow my passion of doing Churchill Downs. And 1999 to 2002, 2001, I generated my business and got a bit of a name for myself. And I found somebody who financed me to make Churchill Downs, the Kentucky Derby, the home of the horse race, the greatest 2 minutes of sport. And I replicated the entire stadium. It took me 4 years, took over $2.5 million to make. And it's still located. It was unveiled to a national TV audience in 2005. It's on the website. People can view the creation on the website. And that's where the dignitaries all came in. I met all the celebrities, people with commissioners, and I become quite I got a lot of notoriety, Steve, because of the media coverage on it and radio and TV. It was covered right across the USA. So it was kind of a big achievement for me personally. And at that point, I knew in 2005 that after I'd been there for so many years, it was time to come home to do my endeavours here in the UK.
But did you write to the Queen?
Well, what happened was 2006, I was there just as a guest, talking to people that were, because it's on the 4th floor of Millionaires Row, Churchill Downs. And the Queen was visiting in 2006. And the chairman and the event manager, good pal of mine, Greg Bush, he says, Craig, he says, where are you? And this was, I was on the 2nd floor. It was about 4 o'clock, about an hour and a half before the race. I says, Steve, I says, I'm downstairs on the 2nd floor. What's the matter, Greg? He says, listen, the Queen is here and she wants to meet you. And I was like, right, well, get to the creation. So I jumped in the elevator, went up and got to the creation. I stood there and there was a big guy standing on the right-hand side. And he had a microphone into his mouth, similar like this, and earplugs. And he pulled me over and he went, you the artist? I went, yeah. I had a conversation with him. He went, he was the CIA. And he was saying, the Queen wants to meet you, but he says, I can't allow her along the corridor here because it was in a public domain. So there must have been about 150 people around the creation. And the Queen was only a corridor along, just along the next facility. And they wouldn't allow her along. They wouldn't allow her along to meet me. So I looked at the guy and I was leaning towards sticking one on him. And he looked at us. I was, come on, you can't not let me meet the Queen. And of course, it didn't happen. So when I left the USA in 2007 to return to the UK to follow my endeavour, as you know what the endeavour is now, I got a letter off the Queen. She wrote to me to congratulate me on my endeavour and wish me the best in all my creations moving forward.
Wow.
Which I thought was quite touching. Prince Charles wrote as well, and Williams wrote, being the president of the FA. They've all congratulated me on my achievements to date.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic,
So,
great stuff.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of weeks, I've been watching some great sports documentaries. I mentioned them on the channel a couple of days ago. I watched the Ricky Hatton one. I watched the documentary about Venus Williams and Serena Williams' dad, which was fascinating. I also watched the John McEnroe documentary, which takes me back to an era of tennis which I thoroughly enjoyed, with the likes of John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, and of course Bjorn Borg. And it was focused on McEnroe's career. But you had the fortune again to do stuff for them as well.
Certainly did. Well, it wasn't actually for. What happened was I was sponsored by a gentleman called Walter Weismuller. Walter was a German guy, and he had a big glass company in Naples, Florida. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine was over there on vacation, and he seen his premises and come back and said, Craig, you've got to go and see Walter's place. And I contacted him, and he invited me over, and we become good friends. And he said, Craig, can you make me a glass tennis stadium? And Walter had done the trophies for the Naveen Masters in 1999. So what we done was we replicated a stadium. To give you an idea of the size, it was about the size of a snooker table. and that was the Naveen Masters of a tennis stadium based in Chicago. And of course, the champions at the Naveen Masters is the Champions Tour, and the tour all around America, and they were based in Florida for that particular tournament. And I had 12 months working 8-9 hours a day for 7 days a week just to make the tennis stadium. Of course, when it was unveiled, it was in the Registry Hotel in Naples, Florida, and John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors was there. And of course, on the court, I featured Jimmy Connors with his double backhand, with his stripy hair, and John McEnroe with his bandana on, and the ball balanced on the net, and he was springing for it with his left foot. And that was the two that I featured on the creation, and the two of them were astounded by it. They come over and they were, congratulating us and getting photographs of it, and there was media there and that. And incidentally, on the evening, there was a presentation to Bjorn Borg. And a couple of weeks earlier, they approached us and said, look, we're doing this presentation to Bjorn to welcome him into the Champions Tour, and we want a replica made in glass. Could you do something? So I always get a feeling from whoever the approach is from, what would you like me to make? And Bjorn's famous moment, which I'm sure you'll know, when he won Wimbledon for the 5th time, and he fell to his knees and threw the racket in the air, and he put his hands in the air and prayed, and he's bend on his knees like this. That's the Wimbledon scene when he won it for the 5th time. I recreated that, probably about the size of, the normal size sculptures that I make, the big ones.
Yeah.
And it was presented to Bjorn, and he was standing there in the crowd with his arm around us, just thanking us. He says, Craig, he says, I've had sculptures of people he says, I've had all kinds of awards and he says, I've never had anything like this. It's incredible. He's actually tear was coming down his ears when he walked up onto the pavilion to get presented with a trophy that I made for him. Not a trophy, but a sculpture.
Yeah.
A sculpture of him, which he signed and I signed, and yeah, that's when it all began, 1999.
Amazing to meet so many celebrities and golfing celebrities as well. What about, tell us the story about the Shark, Greg Norman.
No, fantastic. Tiburon, Naples in Southwest Florida is the only city in the world to have 2 Ritz-Carltons. One's on the beach. I used to demonstrate there for all the big companies that would commission me to go and do demonstrations and talks about the history of glass, the north of England, where I'm from, how I got into glass, and actually what I was going to do and what I have achieved. And there was also a golf resort inside Naples, which is about 4 miles from the beach resort, called Tiburon, which was organised and arranged by Greg Norman. Greg Norman was the professional golfer with the endorsement of Tiburon. Of course, Tiburon, if anybody doesn't know, is the shark. And he commissioned me to do all these sharks for the opening day, and down Alligator Alley, which is what he called where everybody pulled in with the golf buggies. There must have been about 250 people there that day, and I had done a commemorative little shark with Greg's signature on and my signature on for each member of the guests. And of course, become quite friendly with Greg and Big John Daly. Got to know John quite well, and all the golfers, all the Ace Classic is run by a guy who become a very good friend of mine, and he's the event organizer, a guy called Jason Camp. And Jason commissioned me to do something for the Champions Tour. Remember when Mark James won the Champions Tour in Naples, Florida in 2000? Was it 2003 or 4? Correct me if I'm wrong, but Mark James won the big Crystal Award, and I replicated an entire golf replica in plate glass of the golf hole at Twin Eagles, and then I made a great big 2-foot logo of the Twin Eagles flying, which was the country club logo, the Twin Eagles. And every one of the players signed, every one of the champions, there was over 50 of them, they all signed the piece. I've still got that.
Wow.
I've got that on display in Naples, Florida, and I've been back since 2007.
Amazing.
Crazy.
Amazing stuff. Obviously, you work with another one of the greats from Newcastle United, and this was, must have been an absolute honour for you. The Sir Bobby Robson, Bobby Charlton, Sir Alex Ferguson stuff that you did.
Yeah.
The night of all nights was a night that people remember. Tell us how you got involved in that and what you did.
The Bobby Robson Foundation was the benefactor, Steve, And a lady, and I can't recall the lady's name, but she contacted me. I'd only been back in the country a week, just by coincidence, and she contacted me to do something for auction for the evening of the Night of All Nights. So I met her in the town near the Theatre Royal in the coffee shop opposite there, Costa Coffee, and they didn't have a clue what they wanted, but they wanted to commission me to do something to sell it at the event. And I was only a couple of months away from the event, so I quickly I says, well, why don't I made a sculpture of Bobby Robson playing in his Fulham days when he was stretching for the ball with his arms back like this and his legs stretched out there, him on the left there. And then the replica of Alex Ferguson says, well, Alex's greatest moment was winning the European Cup. So let's replicate the European Cup image of Alex holding the European Cup. And then Sir Bobby Charlton, the magnificent Bobby, with his baldy head and his number 9 and his left foot strike. So them images are probably about, I would say, maybe 1.5 feet tall. And then if you zoom into the photograph, or anybody can see, Sir Bobby was stroking his sculpture, and he signed the piece in front of me with me engraving gun. Alex Ferguson had his arm round me, and he signed the piece, and Bobby Charlton signed the piece, and it was put out to auction for the Bobby Robson Foundation at Rainton Meadows in 2000. And it was October 2007, and it was a fabulous evening. And there was a gentleman who was part of the local consortium that tried to buy the football club, Newcastle United, a guy called Wayne Rudd, who sadly passed away. He bought the sculpture on the evening, and the money was donated to the Bobby Robson Foundation, of which they were all over the moon about the level of the finance it raised. It went for 8,500. And when I delivered it to Wayne's house, this was back in 2007, as I say, I delivered it to his house with the signatures on. He said, Craig, he says, guess where I was last week? I says, come on and win. I've never met him before. He says, I was at Churchill Downs in front of your glass creation. He says, you're more famous in America than you are famous here in the UK. I says, I know. I says, I got a lot of notoriety, but I came back to the UK to replicate St James's. He says, wow, Craig. He said, and then he started to tell me about him being part of the local franchise to try and buy the football club, but unfortunately it went to Mike Ashley. And what Wayne said was, he says, Craig, I would have paid 50,000 for this. He says, what do you value it at? I says, it's valued at what you paid for it, Wayne, at auction. It's a finger in the air with auctions items. I says, but with their signatures on, it's worth a lot more than 8,500. He says, I would have paid 50. I says, really?
Wow.
He says, yeah. And of course he got it. And then what happened was, he leaped forward 10 years to a few years ago, and I got a phone call off a company a charity called the UK Share Foundation. They're a suicide charity based in Chesley Street, and they had benefacted from all these years later. Wayne's wife Alison was remarrying and moving to Canada, and she didn't want to take the piece and transport it to America or Canada because the fear of it being broken, which she then donated to the UK Share Foundation through some links that her family have with the proprietor of the UK Share Foundation. And they contacted me to ask if I would authenticate the piece, of which I did 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago now, Steve. And they were going to re-auction it at the closed house event, but it never happened because of COVID. So I've had that article in my possession for the last few years now. And I'm currently hoping that either the current owners in Newcastle may buy it and have it on display permanently at the club, or undoubtedly if they choose not to, then I'll maybe give Alex Ferguson a call and see if they'd like it at Manchester United. But I want it to be at Newcastle because I promised Bobby that, my endeavour would continue with my desire to do the stadium.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed with that. I mean, look, you do glass sculptures. We've got statues at St James's. We've got, we've got the wonderful Sir Bobby Robson and Alan Shearer finally back in the rightful place within the ground. Those statues were designed by Tom Maley. And I mean, me and you have discussed this many a time about different ideas, different plans for outside the ground, and what would like to see. I mean, have you thought about those kind of big statements around the grounds? Anything that you would like to do moving forward?
2005, Steve, if I can quickly go back to being in front of the Churchill Downs creation in America.
Yeah.
And all the media were there, all the different radio stations and all the media stations, all the TV stations from all over the States. They were all there. And I had a particular question from a lady from New York. She was a coloured lady. She was beautiful. And she said, Craig, what's your next project? And I looked at her and in an instant said, well, my next stadium that I'm going to make is St. James's. I says, if you all think that this is something, because the stadium's 20 foot long and 10 foot wide and 16 foot high, and it's one viewing, Steve. I says, can you imagine this replicated 4 times to give it a stadium effect? Where when you view it, you'll walk in and the stadium will actually open so you can see your glass sculpture of you being in the audience. That's I discussed it with Michael Connor, the chief executive at Wembley, back in 2006 before I returned to the UK. And Wembley Stadium were actually just putting the arch on the new stadium, and they were dead keen on learning more. But Newcastle has to be it has to be the first one. It has to be, Steve. And I think about this every day, every night. I've got to put my head on the pillow every night. As an artist, having the endeavour in my mind, I know what I'm going to make, but actually doing it is a different question, Steve. It's got to have a location, and obviously it's got to be endorsed by the club. I can't just go ahead and make one without the endorsement from the club, because it would just be the black and white match. I don't want it to be the black and white match. I want it to be St. James's Park, and hopefully now, after it was poo-pooed in 2010, hopefully now moving forward, my endeavour will happen. And I promise you, Steve, before I leave this planet, I will make it. There's no question. With or without the club, with or without them, I'll do it. Just a matter of what size and what scale and what location it would be its final resting place of where it would be viewed.
Amazing. I mean, that sounds absolutely, fantastic. And I hopefully you do get that opportunity to do that. I mean, looking at it, I mean, what's the kind of cost of these things? I mean, you said there about that Alex Ferguson to Bobby Robson, Bobby Charlton piece. You're right, because I've done auctions myself at events. It's worth what people will pay for it. But is it expensive to make these, Craig?
It's the time consumed. I mean, oxygen prices have gone sky high. I'm finding that now with going back into it full time. And I've always been glassblown part-time and full-time, but the oxygen price has gone crazy. So how much does an electrician charge his time out? My boiler went, and I've got a guy to come fit a new boiler. And the money that they charge for electrician's fees is crazy per hour. So I always kind of look at, first of all, what's the article? What does somebody want? What is this? What's the benefactor? Is it an auction item, or is it just somebody buying a piece for me? A small piece, Christmas ornament, somebody can buy one for £25. The little black and white flag on, or whatever, or a little magpie, 25, 40, 50, 100, 200, 500, 1,000. Depends on what people want to spend, which is where I always feel I don't want anybody paying more than what they want or less than what they want. So that's how I operate my kind of inquiries, is doing them one-off pieces. But how much does it cost to make them? It's the 43 years of learning how to make one within a few days, if that makes sense. So it's glass, gas, oxygen, propane, and then my time as an artist making a sculpture. And I always feel that I've underpriced myself over the years. I've always underpriced myself, Steve, for benefiting whatever the benefactor is. Bobby Robson, my pleasure. I promised Sir Bob that every person that pays to be a glass figure to go in the glass stadium would be a donation to the Bobby Robson Foundation. And I think with the current club trying to make the capacity of the crowd larger around the world as a fan base, I think this could be something that may generate a lot of interest. When I left the US in 2007, coming back here, I think I had a list of around about 5,500 Rangers fans who wanted to pay to be in Glass Stadium. The Rangers fans were, because I was part of the Rangers supporters club in America, and the Rangers and Rangers Ibrox considered the stadium. And at the time, this is 2010, but Martin Bain was the chief executive at the time, and then went to Sunderland, and Rangers went bust, as you remember. So that one didn't occur. Liverpool considered it. Sunderland considered it. Alex Ferguson wanted the Theatre Dreams done, and I was, well, the first one has to be Newcastle. And of course, that's been detrimental to myself because I haven't gotten a deal out of the old administrators at the football club. But now the new owners are on board, and I am hopeful of a more positive outcome to generate something that would be housed at the football club.
Fantastic.
And I've got my own personal feelings, Steve, about it all,
Of course you have.
Yeah.
Of course you have. I mean, I think people seeing your work would say, give the guy a chance. And I hope, if there is somebody watching for the club tonight, that they, they get in touch and give you that opportunity to pop up and just lay your plans out. The best laid plans. People have to see them. And I think the bonus about Newcastle at the moment is you've already pointed out we've got owners now, who are willing to listen. The previous regime, Mike Ashley, Derek Lambias, Lee Charnley, etc. I always felt that the two guys, whoever was underneath Mike Ashley was always going to struggle. You'd have to get the yes from him. And he was never, after the first couple of years at the club, he was never wanting to listen to supporters' ideas. So, and anything that was going to cost money as well just didn't interest him. I think the difference is now that the club is run by people who are forward looking. They want to engage with the supporters. They want to bring stuff into the club. They want to give fans stuff. So, you know what? I think you may have a better chance with these people than you did with the previous regime, Craig. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, we should find out hopefully very soon. But I think the most important point at this point in time is that the football club understand the endeavour, the length of time. I give up my life. I give up my life in the USA to come back to UK just to do St James's. Nothing else matters. Nothing else has mattered. And before I leave this planet, I promise you, Stephen, I will make one.
That's fantastic, and I think that's what Newcastle fans, will want to hear. I want to cover a couple of other photographs that you've sent us because there's some classics. Just want to say, best wishes to Steve Harper on his recovery, because we heard the horrendous news today that he'd had a brain hemorrhage, but it's been operated on. And Steve is resting up in hospital, and he is recovering. So great news. I did manage to get a message through to him, and he did reply. So great to hear that Steve is recovering. But that's a lovely photo. Tell us the story behind that.
That was a commission for a football club who approached us again to do something for an auction item to raise funds for them annually, and I was happy to do that, and I was asked to go to meet Steve so Steve could sign the piece because he couldn't be present on the evening of the event. And I actually took the piece. I made the piece and then took the piece in to see Steve and met him. And that was just in the changing rooms at St James's there, just outside where the press office is. And Steve gladly signed the piece, and we had a bit of a chat. And nice guy, really nice guy, lovely lad, great goalkeeper as well, mind.
He was absolutely superb. And another legend here, a local legend. This guy. Sadly, no longer with us. Blackie, Steve Black. He managed to sign that contract and do a bit for Newcastle with pride. But he was such a big influence on sport in the region, and former doorman as well of these parts. But tell us what you're doing there with Blackie.
That was a Alan Shearer sculpture, and it was at Civic Centre, and Blackie was there as a guest, and I was there promoting the sculpture, and I sat next to John Carver, who was manager at Newcastle United at the time, I believe. And I know John because he's good pals with Peter Beardsley, and we all grew up together. But Blackie's a Benton lad, and he used to come and train with Heaton Stannington and Long Benton when I played for Long Benton and Heaton Stannington. And Blackie was then, he went, "Craig, what you got here?" And I says, "Stevie, look, it's getting auctioned." And that evening, it was a great evening in the Civic Centre. And that was me. That was Blackie getting a photograph. And he good mate of Paul Dixon. Paul still struggles. Paul Dixon, the reporter.
Yeah.
he still struggles with Blackie's death, and it's. But Stevie and I spoke quite a bit. You wanted me to recreate the rugby player that played for him at Marseille, because he was training them down at Marseille. What's the favourite? His name eludes me at the moment. I shouldn't.
Was it Johnny Wilkinson?
Johnny Wilco, yeah. He wanted me to make Johnny Wilkinson. I bumped into him at the fish quay, and he says, "Craig, have you done Johnny yet?" And of course, I says, "You know what it is, Stevie? We must talk about doing one, but it was the one that got away. We didn't get to do that. But what a lovely man back he was. Great bloke."
Yeah, top man. And this one blew me away when you sent me this. I love photographs that arrive, and
Yep.
it was probably the fact that you've got hair, Craig, that blew us away.
The
Not who
mullet.
you were meeting.
The mullet.
Chrissy
That's
Waller.
me with a mullet. that was in 1986, Steve. And what happened was, I was working at Low Friar Street, just down by the side of the gate, where anybody knows where the gate is in the town now, down that side street, down by the Mayfair. That's where the Youth Enterprise Centre used to be. And I had a little business unit in there, and people would come in and buy bits and pieces of work from us. And Maurice Redfern, the guy in the background, was a business coordinator from Procter & Gamble. He was in his retirement years. And Maurice was the advisor to lots of small businesses. And I got the honour of being more so because of my business being very visual, Steve, and doing glassblowing's visual. And I got the honour of getting the Prince's Trust. And Prince Charles was meant to come up to Newcastle to do the presentation to lots of people, and myself in particular. And he double booked so he couldn't come, so he sent his wife. And I had the wonderful honour of meeting the princess there, and spent 15, 20 minutes in her company. And if you look behind my head there, you can see the girl that done the embroidery. She was based in the Youth Enterprise Centre. And then there was a girl with the landmarks on the tapestry. And the three who were with me with a glass in the middle, the three who were Youth Enterprise Initiative-backed businesses. And I'd won the Prince's Trust, hence getting the meeting with Diana. And that T-shirt behind me says, embellished in big red letters across the chest, "I only kiss non-smokers." And when she was talking to me, Steve, this is true as I'm sat here, she turned around to me and she went, "One moment, Craig," and she turned to the lady in waiting and bought 2 of them T-shirts. And I was a bit put out because she just shook my hand, and she went to buy something off somebody else. Obviously, I didn't mind. It was just me in my mind at the time thinking, "Hey, my God," she turned back and she put her elbow into my ribs and she says, "Craig," she says, "nothing to the press or the papers about them T-shirts. I only kiss non-smokers." And I said to her, I says, "Well, I don't smoke." And she says, "Craig," she says, "you'll end up in the Tower of London." I says, "Well, if you're there with us, I don't mind, sweetheart." And with that fact that she wasn't intimidated by me and me not intimidated by her, I was only 23-year-old young lad, and she kind of come closer to us, and she put her elbow and kind of nudged me a bit and said, "Craig, come on, what do you aspire to?" And I says, "Well," and you see the vase there with the two flowers in. There was a little rose in there that I took the rose out, and I give her the rose. I give her a glass rose. I says, "You're the English rose," as everybody refers to. Yes, is the Kentucky Derby is the run of the roses, the greatest 2 minutes in sport. I says, "I'm going to replicate that in glass." That was in 1986. I told her I was going to do that, and she was taken by it. She was definitely taken by it. She left my company, went round the whole building at the top of Mosley Street there, and she met all the different dignitaries that she had to meet. And at the end, she came back and she came over to me and she grabbed me by the arm and pulled me forward to her. And I thought I was going to get a kiss, so I'm puckering my lips for a kiss. And she says, "Craig," she says, "stop." She says, "Stop." She says, "Follow your dream." That's exactly what she done. And I did do that. I followed my dream, recreated Churchill Downs in glass, and it was unveiled to a national TV audience in 2005. And every person in the USA who's seen Churchill Downs, lots of people, there was 30,000 people seen us put it together, Steve. And lots of people were asking, what was Diana like? Because they absolutely adored her. And as I did as well, she was a lovely lady, brilliant to have that private little story with her.
Brilliant.
You know?
No, great story. Great story. I just want to show this as well, because we did talk about this earlier on. There's your England shirt signed by the World Cup lads, and that wonderful crest
Yep.
design there as well, which is really, really good.
Yep.
Fantastic that. And you did send us another one, which was your
Yeah,
dad. Yeah,
that's my dad.
Tell us about this one.
Tommy's 91 now. That's my grandson Jackson, and that's myself in front of the big Al. We had to take Jackson and see Big Alan, and my dad and I and my brother. We've been going to St James's Park. My dad took us the first game in 1969 when Bobby Moncur was playing the first cup team. And that was my first time of going to St James's in the Leazer's End. And then in the early 70s when Malcolm, the magnificent Supermark, joined the football club, and I was there in the Leazer's End with my brother, and just hairs on the back of the neck stuff, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Fantastic.
my dad.
Great photo, that. Great photo. Just talking about Newcastle at the moment, mate. I mean, you were around for the first cup. You're around for the entertainers. Now, Eddie Howe's team. Where does this team compare, do you think, to the teams you've seen over the years?
It's hard to. You can't compare a team of the modern day to the team of the older day, can you? I had this discussion with Kevin Keegan and I, and you can't compare the fans to anybody. They're second to none. Newcastle Football Club is the greatest supported club, if not in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm part of that. And I've got my own stories and private love of the club and played there myself. But you can't compare the team, Steve. Probably greatest player that I've seen play for Newcastle United, Malcolm MacDonald, without question. Peter Beattie, my pal, Peter. I kidded on with Peter. I kidded on with because me and Peter grew up playing together at Wolves End Boys Club. And when I met Bobby Robson, I says, Bobby, when he was stroking the piece, he says, I says, Bob, I was a better player than Peter Beardsley when I was 12. He went, and he looked at us and he went, nobody told me they were ever better than Peter Beardsley. I says, well, I was. And I says, he'll probably tell you that and all. Bobby was, and Alex Ferguson had his arm round us and he was cracking on. I says, Stevie Bruce. We're talking about Stevie because Stevie's a good pal of mine. We grew up playing at Wales End, and Peter Beardsley and Trevor Stephen, of course. The club, man, they're just the teams. I remember watching Trevor play for Everton against Newcastle in the early 80s. Remember when Trevor went to play for Burnley, and then he signed for Burnley, and then he went to Everton, and then they had the first cup run and won the league. And I was in the crowd watching Trevor score against the Toon, and I was thinking, did I do the wrong thing? Because I found glass blown and left me football at the time. I left playing for the county and playing for, South Northumberland. Should I stayed? Should I stuck it out and went on to play? Of course, I had a good amateur career and played at St James's with Long Benton as a centre forward, and Blackie was there watching with and Paul Dixon. And the memories of St James's is just, it's ingrained in you, isn't it? It's ingrained in you. Greatest football team ever, in my opinion. Newcastle, greatest supported team. The new owners, what can we do with this team? Phenomenal. I think they're a fantastic team, Steve.
Yeah.
Yes, they've had a bit of a blip. That's all right. That's just a blip. They're going to come back. They're going to come good. It's hard to play 11 players when you've got 22 wanting a game. Imagine being Eddie Howe, having to explain to each player. Of course, the professionals, they've got to know. You sit on the bench until, if you don't come on and do your job, you'll be back on the bench. And that's what's going on with Isaac and Callum Wilson. The two of them. Should we play them together? I won't criticise Eddie Howe because he's too good of a manager, too good of a man. He's a very intelligent football coach and manager. Look what he's achieved. What's he going to achieve in the next 5 years is the greatest thing, probably be the greatest team that Newcastle have ever had. And my dad would probably go mad because he watched Jackie Milbourne and the 51 team and all the, winning the cup. So that's a hard question to answer that, Steve.
It is. How good is it to have the Champions League back at St James's Park?
I can't get a ticket for life and the money. I can't get into the place. I thought about back in the days in the 70s, I used to go around the back of the Leazer's End, and the Rye Hill mob used to have a big ladder, and everybody would sneak on the ladder, and the ladder went up, and me and Moore Paul and Mickey Armstrong used to be on the bottom of the ladder, and the ladder would go out and up and up, and then along the back of the Leazer's End, we'd be stuck on the back of the ladder. We used to sneak in like that. We were only 7 and 8, 9. God, I mean, you can't sneak in the ground now, can you?
No, definitely not.
The old Gallagher end when we used to climb up the back.
Great to have those nights back though, and well deserved, wasn't it, for the team last year?
Is it always expect the unexpected with Newcastle United, Steve.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Expect the unexpected with a tune. Can they win? Of course they can. They can beat anybody on that day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the air of 100% behind the club, and Eddie Howe's fantastic. I think it's the greatest signing that they've made.
Yeah.
Comparing his team to Mark McDonald's team, it's difficult, isn't it?
Of course
That's
it is.
difficult.
Okay.
But the entertainers.
The entertainers were superb. I just want to give you your website and that a plug, mate, because obviously from your perspective, you know, you are still working, you are still doing a lot. We've had the website address up all the way through the program, so you would have been able to see it. But craigglass.art. You're also on Instagram as well. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, Craig, perhaps for you to do something for them, 07903 332 049 or email info@craigglass.art. I think we've got all the details there, haven't we?
Superb. Be my pleasure. Anybody wants anything in glass, ashes embellished into glass, football club logos, flowers. The black and white roses are magnificent, Steve. The black and white flowers, oh dear me, people go crazy for them. But magpies, football players, their favourite player, whatever anybody wants, I'm happy to take any inquiry about anything.
Great stuff. Well, you're the man to trust. Great to have you on, mate. Great to have an insight into your wonderful career. We've known each other for a long time, and I've even learned something from this today. So thanks for coming on, and let's hope the club are listening. Let's hope the club get you up there to discuss your dream and maybe realising the dream of St James's Park. But for now, Craig, thanks very much for coming on, mate. Take care.
Many, many thanks, Steve. Up the tuna.
A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces Handmade in Cumbria. You can order them from their website, mrvickys.co.uk, or by telephoning 01768 210 102. A big thanks also to New Workwear. You can find them at newworkwear.com. They are an agile and dedicated workwear provider. Welcome back as well to United Travel. They are a UK coaches firm and they are based in the Northeast. They've got 2024 tours and you can contact them on 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Email info@unitedgrouptravel.com and they've got a website which is unitedgrouptravel.com. There's no strangers on their tours, just people you haven't met yet. Big thanks to them for their sponsorship. Big thanks as well to Media Arts, and they supply all the video technology. If you want to become a member and get a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf, then get your smartphone and put it over this QR code. It will take you straight to the membership pack. It's a £25 one-off fee. You can also go to NUFC Matters website and search membership pack to book today. If you want to help the channel, then subscribe to it by hitting the subscribe button. Hit the thumb up under the video to like the video and click share to your other social media. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. Don't forget, we help the food bank on this channel. If you want to do so virtually, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation today. The Alan Shearer raffle is back on. 150 tickets, £1 a ticket. Win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball. Enter today at nufcmatters.com.